Sponsored by College of Applied Business, CAB, Gangahiti, Chawahil, Kathmandu.
Global College of Management, an excellent center for management studies.
Ecotech, Nepal सँगै अघि बढ्दै.
Professor Grant, you are welcome to in this show.
Thank you.
Firstly, how do you introduce your business?
Well, the Crown Institute of Higher Education is a registered, independent higher education provider. In Australia, we have one regulatory authority that credentials all university and college degrees, and we are credentialed with the Australian Government to deliver a Bachelor of Accounting and a Bachelor of Entrepreneurship and Innovation. So we're a business school.
So let's connect this your business with Nepalese students. What are the major current attractions to go abroad, especially in Australia?
Well, since being in Nepal, I've noticed that there is a major thirst for education in Australia amongst Nepalese people. And I think there are some good reasons for that. The biggest rival that we have is the United States. Australia is safer than the United States as a place to live. It is more multicultural and friendlier than the United States. There are over 160 languages spoken in Australia, and Sydney is full of people from all other parts of the world. Australia is cheaper than the United States because the Australian dollar is 30% less valuable, therefore fees cost 30% less in Nepalese rupee to come to Australia. And Australian credentials are well regarded throughout the world. So even if you do your degree with us and come back to Nepal and work in a Nepalese country, your clients overseas and your subsidiaries overseas will recognise your credential. The standard of Australian credentials is also very uniform. So regardless of where you get your credential in Australia, it will be equally recognised overseas. And that's because the federal government of Australia has spent a lot of time developing a tight regulatory system for all higher education credentials.
So how do you interpret entrepreneurship, and how can the Nepalese student be benefited from it?
Well, Nepal is in a very interesting part of its history right now. It is sitting very strategically between China and India, which have the largest populations in the world and the most dynamic economies of the world. Very soon, the trade arrangements and the infrastructure will be in place for Nepal to integrate with those economies and to benefit from the opportunities that will arise. What we hope to do is to improve the people's capacity for spotting opportunities and developing enterprises which will deliver prosperity to them and employment for the people of Nepal. So if a student comes to our business school and learns how to be an entrepreneur, they will be among the highest status people in Nepal, not just because of money, but because the country needs them and recognises their value.
So what are the ways to attract the Nepalese students to use their knowledge and skill in our country who have deserved well in Australia?
We will change the way they think about business. It is one thing to have an idea which is new and innovative, but most of us have that idea and we don't know how to make it happen in reality. This particular course will do two things. One, it will expand their ability to be creative and to be innovative, and two, it will show them how to build a business which can make that creativity and innovation turn into a real product or service which is positioned to deliver them prosperity.
Could you suggest something to the policymakers of our country, especially to create the positive environment to invest here and to produce skilled human resources?
Sure. What I'd like to say to the policymakers is that if you look at the kinds of forums that are happening around the world, such as the Doha Economic Forum, if you look at the interests of organisations like the United Nations, it's all about economics. And the reason it's all about economics is that peace and prosperity go together. If you have prosperity, you have peace. If you don't have prosperity, people look for other means to service their needs, and unfortunately that's war. So, as business leaders and as world leaders, our solution has been in the past economic growth. Look, if we get good economic growth, the jobs are created, the people can look after their own needs. And people are very resourceful. If we just create that environment for them, they would much rather look after their own needs through hard work and enterprise than any other means. The problem is, growth has stalled in the large economies. So in Australia and in America, we're getting growth rates of around about 2%, which is not enough to keep people employed. Now, Nepal is poised to grow very fast. It's got a different set of problems. But at a global scale, we need a new answer for how to keep people employed and how to keep generating prosperity. The old answer was develop natural resources. But we're reaching the sustainable limits of the development of natural resources everywhere. And it's the same in Nepal. All of the agricultural land that can be cultivated is being cultivated. You know, in Australia, we can't just keep digging up coal and burning coal because of climate change. So there are real constraints there. So we need a new answer to the generation of jobs and wealth. And that answer, from all the world leaders, from the Doha round down to the local councils, is entrepreneurship. Muhammad Yunus said recently that the key to new jobs in the future is going to be entrepreneurship. Automation is going to take away half of the existing jobs within 20 years. There'll be robots doing all sorts of things. So we need people who can not just simply repeat old practices, but generate new jobs. And the world is looking to entrepreneurs to do that, which is another reason why people who've done a degree in entrepreneurship and have set about starting up their own businesses are going to be the high status individuals of the future.
So what are the specific reasons for becoming charming in Australia, special charming in Australia for the Nepalese students and for overall?
There are 900,000 international students in Australia right now. 900,000 students can't be wrong. They must find something attractive about Australia. 95% of those students are in Sydney or Melbourne, and most of that 95% are in Sydney. In Sydney, there are 60,000 Nepalese people living right now. And so a student from Nepal who goes to Sydney to study will be bumping into his or her countrymen every day. But probably more importantly, we want to develop at the Crown Institute of Higher Education a global mindset. Now, I've got a global mindset because I've spent my life touring the world and doing business in every other country. But that's a very arduous way to do it. Another way to do it is to come to a city where people from all over the world live and work with them, so that when they do their assignments at our institute, they'll be doing their assignments with people from other parts of the world, and they're becoming comfortable with working collaboratively with people from all over the world. So the best place in the world today to develop a global mindset is Sydney, Australia.
Would you please elaborate more about the security and more facilities in Australia for the students?
For security?
Security, yes.
Okay, well there's two elements to security. One is safety from crime, and the other is the ability to generate your own welfare, find a house for yourself, you know, feed yourself, those sorts of things. So let's talk about crime first. In the United States, there is almost one gun for every citizen. It's a gun culture, it's a violent crime culture. In Australia, there are hardly any guns. We have very strict regulation on guns, and so violent crime is much less likely, sad to say, to result in some sort of injury to you. The people in Australia are very accepting of migrants, and they're very friendly, because for 50 years we've been bringing migrants in from all over the world to help us with our economy. The level of fear in the community in Australia is very low. We are not a terrorist target, and you can walk the streets anywhere in Australia without fear. Okay, that's the criminal side of security. Now let's talk about the looking after your own welfare and living a nice life side of security. It is true that Sydney is an expensive place to live, but we have counsellors who can help students find very inexpensive ways to live. So students, particularly in Australia, will they'll rent an apartment or a house as a group, and they'll divide the rent amongst each other, and then it becomes very manageable, and we can help them do that. There are plenty of cheap ways to entertain yourself in Australia. We have public parks, we have beaches, we have beautiful wilderness to walk around in, we have festivals. We have a big festival, Nepalese festival, every 2 years in Darling Harbour. And here is the most important thing, I think. We encourage you to do some paid work in Australia while you're doing your study. In terms of a business degree, we actually think working in a business is a good way to complement what you learn in the business school. So you're allowed to work up to 20 hours a week in Australia, and of all of the countries that are offering education to international students around the world, Australia has the highest minimum wage.
What is about the climate? Because it is opposite of our...
I wouldn't say it's the opposite of your climate. You know, we're in the middle of winter now in Nepal, and it's a little chilly. This is about what it gets like in an Australian winter. Sydney's a little bit warmer in winter than this. If you come to the Crown Institute of Higher Education, you'll be living in the middle of Sydney, which is next to the ocean. So we get sea breezes, and that moderates the heat. So in summer, most days are around about 29 to 35, which is, you know, enough heat to encourage you to go down to the beach and enjoy the surf.
What context do you claim that Australian education is qualitative than others country?
Oh, right, okay. Well, again, it's helpful to draw a contrast to the United States. In the United States, universities and colleges are regulated separately by each of the 51 states, okay? So there is a great deal of variability in the standard of the credential depending on which college you go to, in which state you go to. You really have to understand that market very well in order to make a safe judgment. In Australia, there are 6 states, and they're fairly much uniform in their legislation, but more importantly, higher education is regulated by the national government. So there is one agency, there are 175 higher education institutions. They are all regulated by that agency. Education exports is the second largest export in Australia, so the government is very concerned to maintain its quality and reputation. So that agency has real powers. If a college or a university is doing the wrong thing, that agency can take away its right to exist, or can take away its right to give credentials. And it does. It's a very powerful institution. So I would encourage students to look up the TEXA website if they're at all concerned about the quality of Australian credentials, and to find out a little bit about it. It's the Tertiary Education Quality Standards Agency, TEXA. And they can assure themselves at that website how well Australian education is regulated.
So what is the future? What is the future of Nepalese students who are attending education there now? Future of Nepalese students.
Yeah, Nepalese students have
over
been
there also, here also.
Yeah, sure. Nepalese students have been coming to Australia for a few years now, and so they're demonstrating their abilities as students. They have a growing reputation as good students. One of the reasons we're here is because we like Nepalese students. They're articulate, they're very good with numbers, they have shown their ability to study hard and succeed, and so they're the people that we want in our institutions. Yes, some of them stay in Australia, probably more than the Nepalese government would like, stay in Australia. And they do that because at the moment the economic opportunities in Australia are overwhelming. And they're so overwhelming that they're going to give up the ties that bind them to Nepal, family and culture and so forth, to stay in Australia. But that will change. can I just use the example of China? When we first started bringing students in from China, they wanted to stay in Australia. Then the Chinese economy started to develop, started to grow. And now, most students from China who come to Australia want to get their degree and go back to China. Because, and this is a point I'd make for your policymakers, you don't have to equal Australia's standard of growth or our wage standard. You don't have to reach that. You just have to improve the opportunities in Nepal enough so that the other ties that will bring people back start to work.
So brain drain is another must challenges for Nepalese country, Nepalese society. So what do you think to stop the brain drain from Nepal?
Well, that's that.
opinion.
Yeah. Well, my opinion is that if you did nothing at all, then that brain drain will stop, because I believe Nepal's going to grow under the influence of China and India, plus its own native creativity. But there are obviously things the government could do to help that along. I think for business to prosper in Nepal, you need to improve your infrastructure, your connectivity. This includes things like improving the internet, the operation of the internet. It involves regulatory improvement so that people can actually establish businesses and have confidence in those businesses. You need access to finance. Nepal has a very low level of foreign debt, so you have a unique opportunity in the world to borrow money to do nation-building exercises. Nation-building exercises require entrepreneurs, you know. You can't make concrete without sand. So all of these things are connected together. So you're in a part of your development where a government with a view towards nation building can symbolically and in material terms do a lot to attract Nepalese back to the country so they can be part of that.
At last, those who are interested students to apply in your college, how
Yes.
can they apply in your college, Nepalese students?
Well, you know, Nepal is full of education agents, and we have relations with those education agents. And the easiest way for them to do it is to find an education agent who has an agreement with the Crown Institute of Higher Education and talk to that agent. But they can also look at our website, which is www.CIHE.edu.au, and they can familiarise themselves with our courses, and then they can apply to us directly if they want. They can call me up, you know, I'm on the website, and they can contact our registrar or anyone in our office who will help them with their application. They need a few things though. We don't just take anyone, we're a bit selective. We're a very serious institution. We want very serious students. So they have to show us in writing that they have a sense of vocation, that they have worked out where they want to be in 5 years, and that they know that a degree will help them to get there. They have to have their 10+2, and they have to have around about a 60% average success rate in that, and a grade point average of 2.5. They have to have an IELTS or equivalent of 6 overall and 5.5 in each band. I will perhaps be a bit flexible on one of those items if the other one is higher. So someone with an IELTS of 6.5, for example, is going to find it just a little bit easier to study, so I might accept them in if they've got a slightly lower 10+2 result. So those things need to be in place, and then they simply make an application. We assess the application and make an offer, and then they go through the process of getting a student visa.
Can you elaborate more about the subject which you are teaching there?
Sure. If you don't mind, I'd like to talk more about entrepreneurship than accounting, because while accounting is very popular and many Nepalese students want to do it, it's a very standardised course. We offer the same accounting course as everyone else does, and so it's probably not so much worth talking about that in detail. The entrepreneurship course is brand new, it's cutting edge, and it's worth unwrapping that a little bit, if you don't mind. Very few places offer a real entrepreneurship experience. Most places offer a business degree, and it's a general business degree, and it deals with managing money, managing markets, managing people. That's essentially the standard fare. Entrepreneurship is something that's starting to be developed because of our sensitivity to world economics and what governments are saying to us. And the focus is far more on creativity and innovation. Only a few institutions in the world are doing this properly, so you have to be very careful. A lot of people say entrepreneurship, but they're really offering an old-fashioned business degree. Okay, what are we doing? Two things. One, everybody has a degree of creativity, but they need help to reach it, for it to reach its potential. So we will expand your natural abilities for creativity and innovation with ideas, tools and techniques. That's one side of it. The other side of it is, how do you create a business that will take that idea and turn it into a real product or a real service that people will want to buy? So on the creative and innovation side, we have a special subject in the major, which is about developing your creativity. We have another subject on disruptive innovation. We have a subject on business planning. We have a subject which looks at the kinds of practices that very interesting entrepreneurs are engaging in that make them different from just normal businessmen. We've got a subject which deals with entrepreneurship in the large corporate space, sometimes called intrapreneurship. That is creativity within a standard bureaucracy. We've got a subject which will teach you about the digital economy, which is where a lot of the creativity and innovation is coming now. And we will teach you not just law, commercial law, but commercial law as it applies to entrepreneurs. We'll teach you how to find finance. Most entrepreneurs start poor, so they can't finance their own ventures. So they have to get finance from elsewhere. So we'll teach you how to attract finance. A lot of people who could have been entrepreneurs have a great idea and then it's stolen by someone else. So we'll teach you how to protect your intellectual property. That's very important. We'll also, in the third year, having dealt with all of that creativity and innovation and business management material, you'll be doing a major project. And in that project, you'll be developing an idea from start and developing plans and putting business models in place. And you'll be working with real entrepreneurs who will help you to develop that. And finally, everyone will have their own little corner of entrepreneurship they want to explore. So some will want to look at social entrepreneurship, which is the idea of not just creating a profit, but creating a profit that also benefits the community. Some people will want to understand the internationalisation of a product and working in a global marketplace. Some people will be more interested in services than in manufactured products. And so we have a range of electives which they can choose from to actually explore those particular interests. And one of the electives is what we call the product launch. So when they've done their project might be so good that they actually want to create a business. And so one of our electives is the actual launch of that business.
At last, from Dean of Crown Institute, any message, any further message for Nepalese students and all audience?
Okay. Yeah, my message is this. The higher education sector in Australia is made up of two kinds of institutions: universities and independent colleges. The universities are very large. Typically they have 30, 40, 50,000 students. They're not very helpful to the individual. Now, if you are the kind of person who can make your way without any help, then universities are a good option for you. If you're at all insecure about your ability to learn at higher education level, if you think you need specialist support with language, if you want to work in a small space, our classes are no bigger than 30. If you want to be known, if you want your lecturers to know you by your first name and know where you're up to and what you need, then a small college is a good option for you. At Crown, our model of teaching is face-to-face, so you will get to know your lecturers very well. Our classes will not be more than 30, and that's guaranteed by the fact that we've built our classrooms so small that they can only accommodate 30. And we have a special interest in tracking you from third year into your career. So the kind of personal attention you'll get at Crown you can't get at universities. Frankly, universities in Australia, I think, have lost their way. For the last 10 years, they have just been boosting their student numbers and cutting their costs. So they are currently staffed by casual staff instead of permanent staff who are working in a number of universities at the same time. Students will not get care in that environment. We have hand-picked staff who are permanent staff, who are permanent parts of the members of the faculty. They have a good research record, they know their material, but they also have a love for students and a history of very good teaching. That's what you'll get at the Crown Institute of Higher Education.
Thank you so much for your valuable time.
Thank you.
Sponsored by College of Applied Business, CAB, Gangahiti, Chawahil, Kathmandu.
Global College of Management, an excellent center for management studies.
इकोट्याक नेपाल सँगै अघि बढ्दै